Most people who criticize Jon Snow say the same thing. He was too good for the game, too honorable, too honest, too much like his father. And that explanation is satisfying. It let us admire him even in failure. It turns every bad outcome into proof of his virtue. But I think it's wrong. Not because Jon wasn't honorable. He was. Not because his choices weren't costly. They were. But too good for politics is a flattering story, and flattering stories tend to stop exactly where the real question begins. Because the truth is, Jon Snow wasn't just a good man who got punished by a cruel world. He was a leader who repeatedly made the right call, and yet repeatedly failed to bring people together. That gap between seeing the right path and making others follow it is what this video is about. Not Jon Snow as a tragic hero, but Jon Snow as a case study in something more specific. What it looks like when moral clarity is not enough to sustain authority. The first defining moment for Jon Snow comes after Ned Stark's death. Robb Stark is marching to war. The North is rising. Jon hears that his father has been executed, and naturally, he wants to leave the Night's Watch and join his brother. Emotionally, that is understandable. His father was murdered. His family is at war. His place, by blood and affection, seems to be with Robb. But Jon ultimately stays. He chooses the watch over his personal grief, duty over revenge, oath over urges. This moment establishes one of Jon's most important qualities. He can subordinate personal desire to a larger obligation. That is not a small thing in a world like Westeros, where personal ambition and family loyalty constantly tear institutions apart. Jon's decision is genuinely admirable. But there is another side to this story. At this stage, Jon does not need to create authority. He only needs to submit to it. The Night's Watch already provides the structure. It gives him rules, identity, hierarchy, and purpose. Jon is strongest when he serves a structure rather than himself. He is weaker when he has to create that structure for others. This distinction matters throughout his entire story. Jon understands duty, but ruling requires more than duty. It requires turning duty into something other people can accept, follow, and sustain. And that is much harder. The wildling decision is probably Jon Snow's most important act as a leader, and the uncomfortable truth is this. Jon was right. Letting the wildling pass through the wall was both morally right and strategically necessary. The army of the dead was real. The old hatred between the Night's Watch and the wildlings could no longer be treated as the central problem. The living needed manpower. Every dead wildling left beyond the wall would eventually become part of the Night King's army. Jon sees this clearly. In fact, he sees it more clearly than almost anyone around him. This is why Jon is not simply naive. He is capable of recognizing the structural picture. He understands that the old categories no longer fit reality. Wildling versus Crow, Norse versus Free Folk. These distinctions matter less when death itself is coming south. So Jon makes the correct decision, but he fails to govern the decision. He does not sufficiently prepare his own men for it. He does not manage resentment. He does not build enough internal support. He does not control the symbolic meaning of what he is doing. To many brothers of the Night's Watch, Jon does not look like a leader making a hard strategic choice. He looks like a traitor abandoning the very purpose of the institution. And that perception matters, because politics is not only about what a decision actually means. It is also about what people believe it means. Jon offers the truth, but truth alone does not command obedience. A more political leader would have combined persuasion with pressure, moral explanation with institutional control, trust with consequence. Jon understands necessity but not preparation. He sees what must be done, but he does not sufficiently shape the conditions under which others can accept it. And so, the right decision kills him. This is one of the most important lessons in Jon's story. Doing the right thing does not guarantee survival. Even doing the strategically correct thing does not guarantee survival. In reality, Jon would have been murdered, and that would have been the end. The resurrection does not erase the political meaning of his death. It only allows the story to continue after showing us the consequence. Jon was right, but he was not politically capable enough to survive being right. The Battle of the Bastard is often read as a story about courage and emotion. Jon charges toward the recon. He takes the bait. He nearly loses everything. But that reading stops too early. The real failure in this battle does not begin on the battlefield. It begins long before the first arrow is fired. Sansa knows about the Knights of the Vale. She has been negotiating with Littlefinger. And Jon does not know. That gap between what Sansa knows and what Jon knows is not simply a communication breakdown. It is a symptom of something deeper. Jon has not built a relationship with Sansa in which she trusts him enough to share critical information. He has not fully integrated her into his circle of trust. He has not managed a political relationship that determines what intelligence reaches him before a battle. A more politically capable leader would have made Sansa feel that her information mattered. That sharing it would strengthen the campaign, not weaken her own position. That Jon needed her judgment, not just her name. He would have built enough trust so that reinforcement would not remain hidden until the last moment. So when Ramsay releases Rickon and tells him to run, and Jon charges forward, it is not simply an emotional failure. It is what happens when a leader arrives at the most consequential moment of a campaign without the political groundwork that would have given him better options. Ramsay wins the psychological battle before the military one begins, and he is able to do so precisely because Jon has left himself exposed, not by accident, but by habit. This is the pattern. Jon is not undone by a single bad decision. He is undone by the accumulated cost of not doing the political work that surrounds every decision. After the Battle of the Bastard, Jon is named king in the north. This moment appears triumphant. The northern lords gathered around him. Lyanna Mormont speaks up for him. The houses acclaim him. But Jon never really wanted this role. He accepted, but he does not seem to understand what the position requires. Almost immediately, he faces the central strategic problem of the North. The army of the dead is coming. The North cannot defeat it alone. So Jon seeks Daenerys Targaryen's help. Again, he is right. The North needs dragon glass. It needs dragons. It needs military support. The existential threat is real, and Jon understands the scale of it. But again, he fails to bring his people along. The Northern Lords do not simply need information. They need reassurance. They need symbols. They need to feel that their sacrifices, memories, and autonomy are being respected. For them, Daenerys is not just a useful ally. She is the daughter of a dynasty associated with madness, conquest, and southern rule. She arrives with foreign armies and dragons. To Jon, the alliance is necessary. To the north, it looks like submission. This is where Jon's political weakness becomes clearest. He keeps asking people to accept the truth before he has earned their trust in the process. He assumes that necessity should be self-explanatory. But necessity must be translated. A ruler has to turn hard choices into a language people can accept. Public opinion is not a shallow concern. It is part of legitimacy. Jon tells the truth. He makes the rational decision, but he fails to manage the public meaning of that decision. And so, once again, he disappoints the people he leads. Not because he betrays them, but because he never fully persuaded them. Jon's final major decision is to kill Daenerys. And once again, the decision is morally and politically necessary. After the destruction of King's Landing, Daenerys is no longer merely a conquering queen. She has become a catastrophic threat. Her victory in King's Landing is never enough for her. She speaks not like someone who has ended a war, but like someone who has just begun a global project of liberation through fire. At this point, Jon faces the most painful decision of his life. He loves her. He has pledged himself to her. He does not want power for himself. And yet, he kills her. This is Jon Snow at his most tragic and most consistent. He chooses duty over personal feeling, harsh reality over comfortable negligence. Just as he did after Ned Stark's death. Just as he did with the wildlings. Just as he tried to do again and again throughout the series. But even here, the act is not the act of a ruler. It is the act of a moral agent. Jon removes a catastrophic threat, but he has no political architecture but what comes next. No faction, no succession plan, no control over the narrative, no real claim to the aftermath. He does what must be done, and then accepts whatever consequence follows. This is noble, but it is not governance. A ruler cannot simply perform the necessary act and disappear into consequence. A ruler must govern the aftermath. Jon does not, and perhaps he cannot. Jon Snow's story is often read as a tragedy of an honorable man punished by politics. That is partly true, but it is incomplete. At this point, it is useful to compare Jon Snow with Tyrion Lannister. On the surface, they seem almost completely different. Tyrion is verbal, ironic, and politically fluent. Jon is blunt, solemn, and deeply uncomfortable with persuasion. Tyrion survives through language. Jon endures through duty. Yet both of them reveal different limits of leadership. Tyrion is very good at words. He can argue, reframe, negotiate, and persuade people in a room. But as I discussed in my previous video, Tyrion is often better at crisis management than true strategy. He can handle immediate problems, but he often fails to reshape the larger structure of power. Jon is almost the reverse. He is not verbally persuasive. He is not politically elegant. He does not know how to flatter, frame, or soften the meaning of hard decisions. But he sometimes sees the structural picture more clearly than anyone else. Letting the wildlings through the wall is structurally correct. Securing Daenerys' alliance is structurally correct. Recognizing the army of the dead as the true threat is structurally correct. Jon can identify strategic necessity. He just cannot build consent around it. In that sense, Jon's failure is a mirror image of Tyrion's. Tyrion has a language without command. Jon has a command instinct without language. Tyrion can explain a weak decision beautifully. Jon can make a strong decision and explain it terribly. This is why Tyrion, in some ways, might have been the counselor Jon needed. Not because Tyrion is morally wiser than Davos. Davos gives Jon honesty, steadiness, and plain judgment. But Tyrion possesses something Jon lacks the most: language, framing, elite management. The ability to turn necessity into a story people can accept. Davos helps Jon remain honest and understand political dynamics better. Tyrion might have helped him become legible. And that distinction matters. Because in politics, being right is not enough. People must understand why they are being asked to follow. They must see themselves inside the decision. Jon rarely gives them that. Jon Snow is not simply too good for power. He is unsuited to rule because he lacks the craft that power requires. He understands sacrifice, but not persuasion. He understands duty, but not legitimacy. He understands necessity, but not political management. He can see the right path, but cannot reliably make others walk it with him. Every society needs people like Jon Snow. People who are brave enough to face unpleasant truths. People who can act from duty rather than vanity. People who can sacrifice their own desires for something larger than themselves. But the existence of such people does not mean they should always be rulers. A healthy system should create an environment where Jon Snow-like figures can thrive in the roles they are actually suited for. Watchmen, defenders at the edge of the realm, servant of a larger mission. People who carry responsibility without needing to be performative. Ironically, leadership itself requires more than Jon's virtues. It requires public communication, symbolic management, coalition building, and when necessary, the credible ability to impose consequences. This is the hard lesson that thinkers like Machiavelli understood. Not that rulers should be cruel for its own sake, but that leadership cannot depend entirely on affection, gratitude, or moral recognition. Love is unstable. Voluntary loyalty is fragile. Rule requires structure, and structure sometimes requires consequence. Jon Snow never fully learns this. He wants people to follow the right decision because it is right. But politics rarely works that cleanly. That is why his ending is not only poetic but satisfying. Jon was never meant to sit on the Iron Throne. He was meant to serve something beyond himself. Being sent back beyond the politics of the realm does not make him small. It may be exactly what preserved his dignity. Jon Snow was a good man. He was often right, but he was not a ruler. And perhaps the most humane ending for him was not becoming king, but finally being released from the burden of pretending he could be one.